Hey, and welcome back to Miss Kitty's Wild West Adventures. I hope you're in the mood for a Wild West murder mystery, because boy, do I have a zinger for you today. I recently performed in a ghost tour in Globe, Arizona, and I first learned of this story. So after falling into the rabbit hole that inevitably opens up when I learn about such stories, I carefully clawed my way out and I bring the story to you, my viewers. Now, before we begin, I must tell you that this one is going to be a mess, literally. So if you're sensitive to blood and gore, you may want to scroll on by. Are they gone? All right, so I trust that if you're still here, you can take some gore and you're not going to be mad at me later for it. So let's begin. Picture it, October 1906. It was early Sunday morning when the townsfolk heard the explosion. Now, being that Globe was a mining town, it was a familiar sound, even though it did seem to radiate from an area not common for mining operations. So after a cursory glance towards the sound, everyone went about their business, recovering from hangovers and getting ready for the day. It was Sunday in a small town, after all. H.C. Hauser was preparing for a hunting excursion that Sunday morning. He was taking two young boys along with him to introduce them to the sport of hunting. It was going to be a long day.
Shh. Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting rabbits.
Just before sunset that day, Hauser and his two young charges were pursuing their prey when they happened upon the mangled body of a man. Hauser alerted the authorities, who brought the man to an undertaking parlor where they could get a closer look at the injuries. The body was blasted into two pieces, and a towel had been wrapped around his neck, concealing a deep wound. Lawmen returned to the area where the body had been found and located bits of flesh and clothing scattered about, but very little blood, if you can believe it. They did find a human heart under a mesquite tree. In addition to all this carnage, investigators found a large divot in the land that could only have been caused by a dynamite blast, and they deduced that the man had been lying on top of the dynamite when it had gone off on Sunday morning. They also discovered an unexploded stick of dynamite right where the head of the man would have lied, and they realized that had it gone off, the face of the man would have been totally unrecognizable.
Beep, beep.
In one piece of clothing, they found a small portion of a pay stub from the Old Dominion Mining Company. After an analysis of the company's records, they determined that the man's name was Joseph Ludwig and that he worked at the Big Johnny mine. This is when things got even weirder. When the man's identity was revealed, Mrs. McInerney, who ran the International Boarding House, came forward and informed officials that she had rented room number 18 to Joseph Ludwig on Thursday evening. She went on to say that on Friday she had entered his room and found the bed and floor covered in blood. Not wanting to draw attention to her establishment, she carefully washed the sheets and scrubbed the floor and told no one of what she had discovered. Furthermore, a housekeeper at the International named Hattie Jackson claimed to have seen the man from room 18 exiting his room on Friday afternoon. She said that he had his coat collar pulled up and something tied around his neck. She also said that he looked like a very sick man.
When people do this, I don't really know what that means.
Immediately, the theories started forming. One theory was that Ludwig had attempted suicide in his room by cutting his throat, but when that didn't work, he decided to go out with a bang and subscribe to Miss Kitty's Wild West Adventures. While this was the running theory for a while, it was soon disproven due to a few reasons. One, there was no knife found in his room. Two, his neck had been so severely cut that his windpipe was 2/3 severed, and there is no way he could have walked the 2 miles from his hotel to the blast site. Third, the towel that was tied around his neck was tied with a string that was so tight that had his windpipe not been cut, the string would have strangled him. And fourth, remember the heart that was found under the mesquite bush? It had been cut out of his chest, not blasted. After hearing all of the facts, the coroner's inquest determined that Ludwig had been murdered sometime between October 25th and October 28th, 1906, but still they had no suspects. At one point, a witness came forward and claimed to have heard two men talking, and one man stated to the other that Ludwig would have to be put out of the way.
I'm sorry.
The men were identified and questioned by police, but both were released. Throughout the investigation, they learned that Joseph Ludwig had recently arrived from Bisbee, where he had been known as Joe Erpelding. They also learned that on the same Friday morning that the bloodbath was found, he had shown up at a different boarding house and had paid for 4 days' lodging in advance. Is it possible that Ludwig was running away from something that had happened in Bisbee and that whatever it was had finally caught up to him in Globe? But wait, there's more. Fast forward 13 months to the afternoon of November 17, 1907. A housekeeper employed at the International Rooming House entered room number 18 and found the body of Richard Vecklund lying in bed. She told her boss, who contacted authorities. When the police arrived, they didn't seem all that surprised. You see, the night before, lawmen had found Richard Vecklund alive but passed out on the street in the red light district. In talking with him, they could tell he was definitely on some type of drug. When they asked him where he lived, he responded with only 3 words, room 18, International. So lawmen took him to the room, laid him down, and called it a night. There was one problem, however. Richard Vecklund didn't live at the International. In fact, that room had been vacant for much of the year following the bloodbath that had occurred 13 months before. This led to speculation on why Vecklund had uttered those 3 words. Is it possible he had been involved in Ludwig's murder and, as he faced his own demise, had felt some type of remorse for his actions? Or is it possible that whatever befell Ludwig had also befallen Vecklund? There is one more connection between the 2 deaths that must be addressed. Remember the housekeeper, Hattie Jackson, who had seen Ludwig exiting his room looking like a very sick man? Despite physicians stating there would be no way for Ludwig to walk without assistance. Well, the housekeeper who found Vecklund's body in room 18 was Hattie Jackson, which of course opens up a whole other can of rumor worms. Was the housekeeper somehow involved in both murders? Were the police somehow involved? As for Vecklund's death, what was known was that his friends had last seen him at 9:30 p.m. Saturday night. They said he had $100 on him and that he was heading to the red light district for some adult entertainment. He was found by police around midnight, severely drugged, and he had no money on him. So the likely assumption was that he had been poisoned and robbed by a lady of the evening. 3 people were arrested on suspicion of murdering Vecklund. One in particular, Elena Mendoza, was allegedly overheard telling someone that Vecklund had come in with a wad of cash and that it had taken, quote, 4 bottles to get it away from him.
Oops.
4 bottles of what? She didn't say. Of the 3 arrested, only Mendoza was formally charged with poisoning Vecklund. However, 3 weeks later, the toxicology report came back. Did you know they had toxicology reports back in 1907? I didn't. And the report had listed no poison in Vecklund's stomach. And so, since the indictment had stated death by poison, Mendoza had to be released. No one was ever held responsible for Vecklund's death. So what do you think happened to Ludwig and to Vecklund? Were the 2 deaths related? Let me know down in the comments. What do you think? What's your best guess? If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you're not already to Miss Kitty's Wild West Adventures. And in the meantime, I'll catch you on down the trail.